Hello. Hello, world. Hello, Internet. We are live. It is another Thursday, so morning, afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. I'm your host, Sam Basu. You are here on the dotNET Dev Show, and thankfully, you're not stuck with me all day today. I have my good friend, Dan Siegel, over here. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing well. Just trying to get my coffee in this morning.
Tell me about it. I'm at 2 cups, and after my coffee, my go-to is Coke Zero. Just gonna keep the caffeine dripping throughout the day. Yeah. All right. So and you're East West Coast, obviously. So it's early morning for you.
A little bit, yeah.
Well, I know you wake up at like 4 for dogs and other reasons.
I've been trying to sleep in lately. But yeah.
All right, so welcome folks. Welcome to Coders Live. It's Thursday, so we're talking .NET, which is our favorite day of the week because we get to not talk about JavaScript a whole lot. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Dan is the man, runs Prism, and so involved with so many aspects of the .NET ecosystem and the community. I invited Dan over, and we don't really have an agenda. We just want to talk through some of the things Dan has been up to. But before we kind of maybe go into anything .NET MAUI specific, let me ask you, Dan, and no one's going to hold you accountable here. You're just like live on the internet. So in terms of like .NET MAUI and the direction, so you saw build happen. What do you like?
What do I like with like MAUI or just MAUI in general?
.NET MAUI in particular.
I think one of my favorite things with .NET MAUI is the team has gotten to a level where they understand a lot more of the importance of testability. I love Xamarin Forms. Obviously, I've been using it for years. But, there are certain things with Xamarin Forms that are just really hard to test because their architectural design pattern was very much about static everything, right? And, in a lot of ways, it's actually surprising that Xamarin Forms works as well as it does. But it is hard to test. And with MAUI, they've really fundamentally taken a interface-based first approach to everything, including controls, that just starts to make it a lot more testable because, now, you're not trying to test a label. You're just saying, hey, I have an iLabel, right? And whatever that entails, like whatever the implementation is, doesn't really matter. So there are some really neat things that are able to happen because of that.
Yeah, no, well said. And folks, if you're just tuning in and if you have not played with the .NET MAUI bits of late, that's the GitHub repo. And so essentially it's a evolution of what Xamarin Forms used to be. We are bringing parts of Xamarin a lot more inside the .NET ecosystem with .NET iOS and .NET Android, and MAUI is supposed to power your cross-platform apps. So from a single code base, single project actually in Visual Studio, you should be able to fire up apps that run on iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. And I think I agree, Dan. Like to your point, I think they have been a little bit more in listening mode to understand where some of the pains are with Xamarin Dev today, and then trying to address some of them. And you cannot make everybody happy. So
no, you never will.
You never will. I was trying to catch up on, build happened, and then Jeff Fritz did a whole show, C# Fritz, he's on Twitch with us all the time. He did a whole build recap show. I did an hour, he did 8 hours. But he had gotten Scott Hunter and David Ortno and some of those .NET folks on the call. And there were some difficult questions, to be honest. So they are being asked, what happens to Linux, right? Linux support. Can I take .NET MAUI to WebAssembly and to the browser? And so I think the thing is it's early days, and they have to, like, even with Microsoft and all of their engineering, like, you have to choose the battles you want to pick first, right?
For sure.
It's tricky, and I just saw somebody made a PR to bring React Native through the Blazor web view onto desktop. And yeah, I get it, but it's just like way too many ways of doing the same thing. I mean, there's React Native for desktop already, but
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's so much fun to talk about the good, right? And I don't think that sometimes we talk about the bad stuff enough too, because there are some things that I look at with the whole evolution to .NET MAUI that kind of give me a little bit of pause. And it's not MAUI itself. It's not what they're trying to accomplish. Honestly, a lot of it just kind of comes down to timelines and the realities of any software project. I don't care who you are, if you're Microsoft or, whoever else. The simple reality of it is when you really start looking at the engineering team for MAUI, it's not that big. And, with a small team like that, they have a really big chunk that they've tried to bite off in one go. So I do look at that and have to kind of ask myself, right, like, realistically, I mean, they've kind of set this hard deadline of November to release with .NET 6, and how do they even make that? I honestly don't know. I mean, if they manage to make that, I mean, my hat's off to them, because that's impressive. Especially when you look at, for, I know a few people I've talked to have had this issue. I have this issue, even with Visual Studio 16.11. I still, to this day, cannot build for any target outside of WinUI. It's only from the command line, only from like Visual Studio Code with the MAUI extension that you can even build any of this stuff right now.
And some of the tooling is really not up to them, and it's just really lagging behind. So like for .NET MAUI, my go-to is almost always command line.
So it's like, but how do you build something like MAUI? I mean, and this is part of the, they've taken a pretty big bite to go in one go. It's like they have this hard dependency of having the native iOS and Android SDKs as part of .NET 6, and some of the build targets that they're relying on from the .NET 6 SDK. And then you kind of fast forward to some of the developer tooling that they need to handle this migration to single project. So, I mean, again, I mean,
it's a lot.
It's painful as a developer trying to work on a library that you're trying to migrate over right now. I can only imagine, what John, Dick, and Shane and the rest of that team is going through, because it's a headache right now.
Yeah. Before we get to migration, so H3 Tech is in the chat room, and React is like a monster that's misunderstood. Yeah. Hey, I mean, who are we to be judgmental? I mean, if you're building web apps with React, like, I know so many folks who absolutely love it, and go for it. And those apps will run just fine on desktop today. You don't need MAUI. I mean, there's Electron. It'll do just fine. But I think there's a little desire to get it working through MAUI, and so this is funny. Dan, David Ortno also got asked. So with the whole like Blazor story, with Blazor hybrid apps, although hybrid is like a heavily overused term, it's Blazor on desktop, right? So essentially, .NET MAUI is giving you the shell, the Blazor web view, and you just like stick in whatever Blazor stuff you want server side, and it'll just work fine on desktop and iOS and Android. So David got asked, like, what if I wanted to go reverse? Because there are still folks amongst us who want to see XAML work nicely on the web, and yes, Uno platform is there through WebAssembly, but it's just not a question Microsoft wants to tackle right now, even if there might be a desire.
Yeah. I mean, I question WebAssembly personally. I mean, I think I've got the Sponsor Connect portal to kind of bring some additional benefit for those people who step up and help sponsor myself and Prism. So I had actually done a conversion of Sponsor Connect to Blazor Wasm, and it was a major regret. I mean, like it was really cool while I was playing with it, while I was doing all the development. But man, oh man, like once I deployed it, it was just an absolute nightmare. In fact, on my phone, the Blazor Wasm, deployment, it's still cached on my iPhone. I cannot get it to clear that cache and get the current actual live app. So
okay, and you're spot on. So like WebAssembly is so exciting to demo, but once you get to the crux of doing something, you have to think it through. And this is funny. So Ed Sherburne, my partner in crime, he is all in with Blazor client and server side. So we are doing a meeting where Ed had stepped away for a bit, and we had one of our Blazor engineers on the call. And he's talking about Blazor on desktop, and he's like, yes, this is full .NET framework, or full .NET, like full performance. I'm so glad that there is no WASM here. So yeah, I mean, it's just like the right tools. If you really, really desire to have your XAML stuff on the web, then yeah, go look at WASM. But I don't think Maui is going to do that. Like Dan, you're saying, like it's already a lot they have promised. So let's see until November.
Well, and it's a lot of circular dependencies.
Yeah.
Circular dependencies are dangerous in the first place. This is just full of them. Yeah. At some point, like you're thinking like React and Blazor, like these are like web technologies. So just if you want to go to the web, just like go. You don't have to go through Maui and then back through WebAssembly. Anyways, so again, like the right tools for the right job. Pick what works for you. Okay, so you mentioned Prism. Give us a 30,000 feet quickly on what Prism is and where are things now. So Prism is an MVVM framework that was originally developed by the Microsoft Patterns and Practices team long time ago. Dinosaurs roamed the earth in
2008.
Hey, you know what? In the web world, that's like dinosaurs roamed the earth, right?
Yeah. It's like I remember those days. Like 2006 was when WPF was out, and then I think 2007 onwards, the Patterns and Practices team started talking about MVVM. Like I don't know if you can tell, like we are a little old. So that's where it was born, and then you and Brian took over. So kudos to you.
Yeah. So I think it was around 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. They open sourced Prism, and Brian Lagunas, as well as I think it was Brian Noyes, kind of took charge. Yes. And, sadly, I mean, Brian Noy has had other responsibilities that kind of took precedent for him, and he had to kind of move on. But, Brian really kind of helped shape Prism in a great direction, and kind of bringing support over for Xamarin Forms. And at the time for myself, like I was getting into Xamarin Forms, like basically as soon as they announced it. And I had been tooling around and trying out this Xamarin Forms thing, right? And trying to see what we could really do with it. And it definitely, like, it proved itself, as useful, but it was like just horrible code. And then,
like, well, what is this XAML? This new form of XAML? I remember those days. Like Miguel J. Caza had to defend it so much, like with the XAML people.
And it took over. It took over all the Xamarin Forms, and it's like on kind of like a side note, right? Like I find it so hilarious. Apparently, we can become famous there. But it's so funny to me because like the last year or so, there have been a couple of people in the community that are all about this code first approach to building their UIs. and it's like they've completely forgotten the lessons that we've learned as a community along the way of, hey, we used to build everything in code. Like the community made this transition to XAML because you end up with much, much cleaner code bases, and it is so much easier to maintain. But yeah, I mean, when once I saw Prism for Xamarin Forms, I kind of realized that it was just something that, I needed to really look at more. And I loved it. I thought, hey, this is great, but there are some things I would like to work better. And so I started bugging Brian by email. I was like, hey, buddy, like, can you fix this? Can you fix that? And he said, can you send me a PR?
If you complain enough, come and fix it.
Yeah, it was like, if you don't like it, send me a PR and we'll look at merging it. And I did, and one thing led to another, and fast forward a few years, and here I am, one of the maintainers of the project. So
and we're very thankful for all that you do. So this has been working for Xamarin Forms, but you sent out a tweet right around when Bill was starting to say, "Hey, here are the alpha bits for making Prism work on Maui." So do you want to share your desktop? Maybe show us something?
Yeah, sure. Let me see if I can wake my mouse up here.
While I kind of try to mute all of these trolls. Don't do that, people.
All right. Share screen. I don't need the tips. And the dog's going crazy.
He's a little unhappy. He or she?
He we got him like last year, right as lockdown started, and he's just a very wild thing. He's still very puppy. He likes to play a lot. No. So one thing some people may notice is I do kind of like locally, I am playing with Prism Unity.
Let me post this link that you just sent me.
Yeah.
So this is out on GitHub, right? Whatever you're playing with.
The Prism Unity isn't. I'm still kind of playing with that locally, trying to get that working. But the rest the rest of Maui is all up on GitHub, so you can download this and try it out, anytime here. So. A couple things you'll see is, basically the sample app is, just run dotNET new Maui, and there you go, right? There's nothing really special about that demo app at the moment. So, these are all very early bits. It's not like this sample app is going super in depth by any stretch. But this really, at this point, this is a good place where you can start to play with the API. You can see, what you like, what you don't like. But there are.
Can you show us? So the .NET new Maui templates are new, but this is a new CLI template you got. Can you show us this working?
Well, no, this is not a CLI template. So this is just like literally what you would get from .NET New Maui, the sample project.
Okay. So you have the .NET New Maui, but then you are strapping on the Prism bits on top of it.
Yeah. So the little changes, we are actually running the Prism Dry IOC Maui, pieces in here. So one of the things that I think is kind of interesting for people to understand, right, is with Maui. It is a bit of a different paradigm than they're probably used to with Xamarin Forms. Now, if you're using something like Shiny, it is a little bit closer because Shiny kind of took that Microsoft, ASP.NET approach of let's kind of have this startup class, and we'll bootstrap all of our services and register those with the iService collection, and you kind of have this host builder pattern that they're using. And so Maui is really architected more in that sense. So it is a lot different than, traditional Xamarin Forms applications today. Now,
so this, by the way, since you mentioned, this is, that's the Shiny that Dan's talking about. This is a big part thanks to Alan Ritchie, who I think maybe in the chat room. he said he'll come and troll. But
He always likes to.
Alan is from Toronto and spends a lot of time maintaining this. If you are into Xamarin Forms dev today, and Alan's been on the show talking about Shiny 2.0, which was a lot of work, but a lot of the abstractions of how your app bootstraps. And then when you have to get into the device-specific APIs, which are just, it's just maddeningly diverse. So, Shiny really helps. So take a look at that.
Yeah, I mean, Shiny is amazing, right? Like, I remember back in the, like the old Xamarin days and going through Xamarin University and, everybody going, well, these background things, like these are hard. Like, why doesn't someone just abstract it? And, the answer was always, oh, well, it's too different. You'd never be able to do it. And along comes Alan and says, hey, guess what? So you got to love that. Now, I did kind of enable this, like show all files, because there are actually a couple files that are hidden here. And my guess is that these files will probably be auto-generated for you as we kind of move through the process. But right now they actually are there. They're just kind of hidden. But you notice, like if I'm looking at Android, I have my application, I have my main activity, but there's actually no real code in this, right? So my main activity just inherits Maui app compat activity. They're hooking into all of the lifecycle events, right? They're hooking into everything that we need. So there's very little that we need to do.
Show me your startup.cs. So you're literally letting Maui do its thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, like our entry point is just a Maui application with this startup. And, and for crying out loud. And, here is our startup, right? So it's still pretty simple. We can obviously make this quite a bit more complex. Like I guess in preview 4, they started adding this configure fonts in here just so you can kind of see what it's like to add a font from a cross-platform perspective. Let me see. I'm trying to remember what, I think it might be app configuration. So they do have some stuff in here, and I can never remember. I'm terrible with this stuff. But they have like some stuff where you can hook into like when the app wakes up, like basically you're on resume, on sleep, all of those life cycle events that you're getting from that native platform. And kind of good thing, bad thing. I mean, it's kind of funny, like the software development industry, like we just kind of go in cycles, right? So we just recycle ideas from X amount of time ago and we rebrand it as this brand new thing.
That's what you get, folks, by hanging out with folks like Dan and me. Like you see a lot of the recycle.
Yeah. So now, instead of shared, it's just now cross compiled. So you get that same, everything now becomes, if what is it, NET 6. Thank God they have like some of this. Well, this one isn't as good, but you'll have like my other Visual Studio that has more stuff in it. Gives me better IntelliSense. So like you could have like NET 6 iOS or Android or whatever, and you're gonna just end up with some of that stuff to do registrations.
Okay, so I'm trying to read up the last post from the Maui team, David, actually on preview 4. So this new way of including like fonts, I mean, this is separate from like the raw assets, right?
Yeah. So you have, really, I mean, you'll be able to do any kind of asset that you're trying to bundle, and then you have, fonts, which this is just a different take on like embedded fonts. So instead of this being embedded, this is just now like, I guess, where is it? It's in the resources folder, and then you have fonts. So this is just a cross-platform folder. So rather than duplicating this font at the platform level, this is just at the project level, and you're just able to say, hey, I have this font and go use this on the native platform, however that happens to be.
And could you open up app XAML for a second? I'm just trying to read through some of the code that they had, because they had like markup type things. So I think here, which is where we set like resources, like you could do like a MAUI asset or a MAUI splash screen that also should work cross-platform, right?
You probably can. Yeah. I mean, I haven't gotten too much into some of that. As I recall, like really some of the cool stuff is like John Dick had come out with the resizetizer. Where is it? Right here. So you have, some like resizetizer instead of being like a John Dick project is actually part of dotNET MAUI itself, which provides some interesting benefits here. One of them is, again, you see that we have our images, at that cross-platform level, and we're able to say like, hey, go ahead and include anything in resources images as a MAUI image. And, similarly, you have like MAUI font that does the fonts. And then the other thing is, instead of having, my .NET bot in about 80 different resolutions, I just have a single SVG here, and it handles the rest, which is absolutely beautiful.
Just like think about the different types of devices where this would be running. That's a lot to handle, just the resizing of everything and catering to every form factor.
Yeah. So, well, and every platform, every form factor. So, I mean, it really adds up pretty quick. One of the other interesting things here is like you have this app icon SVG, which is actually just in the resources folder. And then this, what is it? App iconfig or whatever, or icon FG, what, I don't know. So I guess it's like the foreground or something. And so you can say like, hey, this is the app icon. So this actually now, like, even though it's still a MAUI image, this gets processed as that native icon file that you're going to need. And you're not duplicating this, 100 times. Your splash screen is defined right here.
Yeah, right there. Again. That's the one I was talking about. It's not actually in app XAML. It's in CS Proj where they're doing this.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's definitely, a huge win, right? Like, I mean, I know for years I've always kind of struggled because, I mean, first of all, when you're a forms developer, you spend so little time in the native stack. You're not an expert at all of the layout,
But then you do have to go to the native things and do these annoying things like fonts and images of various sizes. So this is actually, give me a second.
Yeah.
Sorry. So this is actually Jake. I think Jake Kirsch, right? He is the one driving the single project drive for MAUI, and these are some obvious benefits that you don't have to duplicate for across every project.
Yeah, well, and you have some other things that aren't necessarily, image or font related. I mean, those are great because it's just, I mean, just to have an SVG and now you have like this perfectly scaled image. I mean, that's huge. But then, little things too, like, hey, my application title, the application ID, normally you would have to set these on every single platform, right? And they're going to be the same everywhere. So why not give me a way that I can do this cross-platform? I don't know that. I mean, my question for them, I honestly don't have an answer to this, but, what does that look like from a multilingual standpoint, right? So like if I'm localizing my app across English and Spanish and say Portuguese and, Russian or whatever, what does that look like? What does that story look like? But, I definitely think we are heading in the right direction where this is being done one time. I don't have to duplicate things that are just like I'm building an app.
Yeah. Okay. And are you in VS 1611 preview? What is this looking at?
No, this is the stable 1610. So I actually don't know what, because like this is my demo version that strips out basically everything, and then has larger font sizes by default to make it way easier when I'm presenting.
Yeah, of course. So these are all the built-in things in Maui, but you showed me the Prism like entry point, and that's just one line in main activity, and then in the does iOS have a file as well?
I'm trying to remember if it does or not. It's one of those things. I think that they are working through, like, because let's see. Oh, yeah, we have app delegate. It's just not hidden, but it's just as, it's just as empty. There's nothing there. There's nothing to look at.
Right.
We're not having to say, forms and NET anywhere. So I mean, it is quite neat what we're able to get here. I know, like, we've always kind of said, oh, well, Xamarin Forms is 96%, shared code. And it's like, well, what's the other 4%? Program and app delegate on iOS, and, main activity on Android.
And info plist.
Yeah, info plist. Yeah.
Yes.
So we've really reduced even what we have to do at that platform level, which is pretty cool.
All right, so you had Prism for Xamarin Forms, but to get it to work, even alpha stage for Maui, what did you have to do?
There was a lot of banging my head against a wall.
I was going to say, except for like tons of coffee, like what did you have to do?
It might have been spiked coffee, but so Prism, has some interesting challenges for Maui, because there's a certain desire that Brian and I have had to kind of unify the Prism API, so that way it's not so difficult trying to figure out how to use it, whether you're coming to Prism for Forms or WPF or Uno platform, and I guess technically now WinUI. With Maui, though, it has such a different application life cycle that we did have to kind of bend some things a little bit here. So, really in order to kind of hook in at the appropriate time, instead of doing all of your bootstrapping in the application like we would traditionally do, what I ended up finding was that, you couldn't actually do that. You really had to instead kind of say, like, okay, well, we're gonna have the separate startup, and then we're gonna return, we're gonna get into the application, and we can do a little bit more configuration, because Prism has always kind of had this stance of we only want to work with a mutable container. And basically what that means is the containers that we choose to work with, which are dry IOC and Unity, allow us to register services, and then we can resolve something, or we can resolve a bunch of things, and then we can say, okay, well, we need to actually register some additional services here, and then we can continue resolving whatever we need. And certain things like Microsoft extensions dependency injection are immutable. So once you create that service provider, you can't go back and add more to that service collection. And so that kind of presents some challenges. But, luckily, I mean, we do use dry IOC and Unity, and, we were able to kind of provide that service provider for Maui, which is kind of what we do here.
So Alan's in the chat room, Dan, and he's saying it's too early for you. You can't fight back without coffee. So it's like, why is this not ready yet? I need Prism for Maui.
I've got my coffee right here, buddy.
Yeah, and then to be honest, like we have had these struggles. It's just early days. Like a lot of things in the Maui tooling. I mean, they're doing all of the work underneath, engineering-wise. But the tooling, the bootstrapping has just been a lot of like changes and a lot of updates every release. And I mean, I'm sure if we get time, we'll talk about your UI library. But getting things to work has not been as quick as many of us would expect. But maybe that's expected given how new this is.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was of the thought process like, okay, preview 4 here, for 3, 4, like we should be able to build from Visual Studio. And I found out like that's just not a thing. So, it makes it interesting to try to, add support for something that you have a really hard time building.
Yeah, early days. We got a long runway between now and November as well.
Definitely.
All right. So where are things at? Where are you able to register? Where are you able to bring in Prism?
Yep. So, traditionally, like if you just did, your Maui kind of template, right? Like instead of saying use Prism application, you would see use Maui app. And so basically your one line difference in your startup is to just replace that with use Prism application.
That's
and
clean.
Yeah, which is pretty nice. And then, we do have this container options builder that kind of allows you to select which container you want to use. So in the future, you saw earlier that, I am working on getting support for Unity as well. So if you wanted to use Unity instead of dry IOC, you could do that. But you could also do, some additional things here. Let me just kind of, I only wrote the API. It doesn't mean I remember everything about it. But you can kind of append some required types. You can override the default for required types. So basically in Prism applications, so when we go and we look at Prism application here, what we'll find somewhere in here is... Oh, actually, no, that's right. It's a little different on this platform. See, even I have to try to remember. Normally in Prism application, you would see a register required types, and that actually moved into the container options builder. Now, some of this may not be particularly useful to you from like a background scenario, before you're really in the UI, like obviously the navigation service, but definitely, I've seen a lot of use cases where maybe someone wants to use the event aggregator. And so, or even like the dialogue service to like, hey, if the application is in the foreground, let's go ahead and present some sort of dialogue. So we do make sure that these are registered. You do have the ability to override the defaults that, we give you out of the box. Or if you need to just make that append, you can do that. But, we tried to keep it as clean as possible, and still kind of give you the same kind of abilities that you would have today, just in a different way, because it is a very different API with this whole startup mentality, versus, us having full control in Prism application.
Yeah. So
I know, like, saying, append required types looks exactly like saying, override this method and then, call base, but that's, just effectively what you would be doing with Maui. So
if you just did like just the basics, use Prism application, use dry IOC, what do you get out of the box? Like, is there nav? Is there model view binders? Like, what are all the things?
Yeah, so if we look just, I'll go back to the required types. So out of the box right now, you get the event aggregator, you get just like this keyboard mapper, which is a newer thing. And I think
what is the keyboard mapper?
Basically because in like the new dialogue service, because we do kind of map the dialogues that you would normally have access to, like in your main page or whatever your page is. And so like one of the newer APIs actually kind of allows you to, pass in a keyboard. And so the keyboard mapper kind of allows us to do this in a little bit more abstract way where we're not taking as heavy of a dependence on the, well, I mean, in Prism Forms, it would be the Xamarin Forms API here, obviously the Maui API. But you're not taking as strong of a dependency on that UI concept. So we kind of abstract that out just a little bit, but then still, we're able to pass that into the dialogue service. So that way you can get that proper keyboard that you want. I can't remember when it is. The Forms API has grown so much over the years now. So what was it? It's not alert.
And this is good for access.
The prompt, yes, yeah. So it was the prompt that had the keyboard. So that's basically what you get there. We do have like this Ipage behavior factory, which is not really something that you're using. It's something we use internally to apply different behaviors to pages. But it is something that some people will override. Like, let's say that, just by default, you want all of your pages to have, like the use safe spaces, kind of attribute, right? Like if you want to set use safe spaces or some other platform specific, you could add a behavior that, adds that to the page, register your own page behavior factory, and now every single page in your application lights up with that. And then you have
catalog initializer.
So you get all of the modularity and then the navigation service, and that's pretty much what we've brought over. I don't even want to think about regions right now, but so we've made a pretty good first effort into kind of converting everything over to Maui here.
Yeah.
I see Curious Drive showed up here. So
yeah.
Hello, Curious Drive.
Okay. All right. So you had to move this from the way we used to do a startup to a different container options builder. And where would this be? Look, this is still like you have an IOC folder. And what are the other things you're doing? And this is all still cross-platform. You're registering it one time. What are all of these other things you have in the IOC folder? Or are they not important to Prism's running?
Yeah, so, like this iResolver overrides helper, not really important. It's not even used at the moment. This is something that we have like in Prism Forms to kind of help add support for regions. That way we can provide specific instances of services that we need to be able to inject into whatever we are resolving. For instance, like, if we're resolving that region and you need the navigation service, we want to make sure that, you have the correct instance of that navigation service when we go to resolve the view model. So some other things here that are newer that, we're not going to, like, you're not going to see this in Prism Forms is like this iService collection aware, which is just a new interface that we've kind of added because Maui uses the Microsoft extensions dependency injection, right? So we need to be able to work with iService collection and iService provider. And, part of that whole process is like, if you want to provide your own, trying to think how to explain, but like if you want to provide your own container for, for anything, like whether it's ASP.NET Core or just a console application, part of that whole host builder pattern kind of says like, you need to implement this iService provider factory. And then they have a couple of methods that are defined here to either create the builder, where they kind of pass in the iService collection, and you pass back whatever your container type is. And then alternatively, is they pass that container in, and then you pass back an iService provider. And so that's kind of what we have going there.
And while we're talking, folks, if you're just joining us, we're talking about dotNET MAUI and kind of migrating things to it and making things work. And let me see. So that's the repo. That's the Prism for MVVM framework for XAML code bases that we have always used. And Dan is talking about moving it over and working on MAUI.
I love this from Curious Drive. No, they did not provide dependency injection out of the box in Xamarin Forms. They did provide a service locator that was poorly designed, but they did provide. They did not do dependency injection. There's quite a big difference in that. So, luckily, you know, they've come a long way. They understand that just the way to build a quality application, you're going to end up using a container, and so they've kind of given you that first class experience. Yeah. Good decision they made. Yeah. So that's basically Prism application. I mean, there are some little things here like, oh, for crying out loud, stop showing
what is that? Oh, line endings.
Yes. Yeah, so you know, there's some like little things here. We have like just this Prism application window. It does absolutely nothing except implement iWindow. And really kind of the reason why I did that was, and maybe they've changed this, but like the window type that they kind of gave us with MAUI required that you passed in a page as part of the constructor. And I was like, no, I need to create the window and then we'll go figure out the page later. You know? So it's not really something that you would likely use. It is, again, it's a little bit different. Actually, I think probably the easier place to look at this is in the sample. So you would normally have, actually, what is I can't remember there's like another, like, I think it's like on create window or something, and they pass in the activation state. We kind of changed that up with a couple of understandings. One is that we understand that the Prism navigation is going to be async, and so we actually do provide this as an async API to make it just a little bit easier. But if you were to do your, you know, .NET new MAUI and you see that template in the, you know, on create window or whatever it is, so just slightly different from this. You know, you would see the same code, and so you can do that here with your activation state, and you can enable the forms compatibility mode.
Okay, so I have a few questions around this, but just a quick point here, folks in the chat room, ignore the Nightbot things for now. We had a long stream yesterday. It was like all day React, and looks like the bot is still running. So ignore that. I can turn it off, but it's going to take me a bit to kind of log in, which I've forgotten how to. So ignore Nightbot. But right here in...
you mean you're not TJ and we're not talking React?
Yeah, like, well, you're still Dan, and but I can't talk React. Yeah, it's funny. So I think Seth, who works at Microsoft, hosts so many build sessions, and you know, he's the host for a lot of things. And he was, I think, playing around with React yesterday for the first time. He was like, "Why is this so complicated?"
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's hilarious.
It's funny. It's just whatever floats your boat, right? Tell us what you know about the compatibility thing with forms in it. What does that one line of code do?
So kind of the dirty little secret, and I believe Telerik has like, you know, MAUI support with Preview 4 as well. Or am I lost on that one? Okay. Yes. Okay. So the dirty little secret that, you know, you don't normally hear from people, right, is the way that most libraries that you're going to see, and I believe Telerik is the same way, at least on probably most of it, because it takes time to convert from that legacy renderer over to the new handler style with MAUI. And, you know, like none of this would work if you can't still use renderers. And basically what that's going to do is light up all of these legacy things that you would get, you know, because there's still legacy code. I think like even in tab page. So some of the tests that I ported over for Prism from Prism Forms to Prism Maui actually failed because I didn't call forms in it, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's basically what that's doing is it's still like it's that hook into some of that legacy code that still kind of exists that hasn't been fully ported over yet. And then kind of still gives us that renderer support is pretty much what that's doing.
So I was trying to learn a little deeper yesterday, and I came across this one, which I had seen before. I just did not remember. So there's this guy, Javier Ruiz, I think is his last name.
Yeah.
I think he's out of Spain or somewhere in Europe for sure, but he works on the Xamarin with the Xamarin teams and the Maui teams. Last year, there was a conference called Monkey Fest, which is for all of the Xamarin folks, and he did a session on the handlers in particular and the things that they're trying to fix. It is very enlightening when you go under the covers to realize what is being done. But it takes a little bit of an effort to go from renderers to handlers. So that's what the compatibility is for. It lets you still run your renderers the way you have been.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, you know, I think that you'll end up seeing this compatibility thing stick around for well into 2022 at the very least, because I think a lot of people are just going to say, look, you know, it's a huge effort to migrate this over from renderers to handlers. And yes, we see the benefit, but we also only have so many dev cycles that we can allocate towards it. You know, I don't know what the forms team or sorry, dotNET Maui team, same thing, but you know, I don't know what you know, what the Maui team is going to decide to do internally. But you know, certainly like I don't know that you can fully rely on every single thing, whether it's the community toolkit or, you know, like stuff like the Telerik library. Like that's a lot of work to convert that over for sure.
So since you mentioned, I'm going to just briefly touch upon this. So we did release our early preview bits for Telerik UI for Maui, which again, I mean, Maui is coming out very early days. You don't expect us to not do anything. So we did put a kind of a stick in the ground, things like 4 components, but to your point, like this is work. This is real work that engineers are having to spend hours doing. So we have gotten with kind of a mixed mode right now where 2 of our controls are using the brand new handlers, but then 2 of them are still using the renderers. And then the compat mode. So yeah, take a look at that if you just want to give it a try. It's all free and it's there for you to try things out.
Yeah. So it's definitely, it's pretty interesting. You know, like I said, I mean, if you're using Xamarin Forms and you want to try to get an idea of what this is going to be like without the headache of being on the bleeding edge of previews and, you know, not really having the tooling to build all of these things, like honestly, my honest opinion is just go try out, you know, Shiny with a Xamarin Forms application today, and the application, you know, pattern of like, hey, we're going to have this startup class that we're going to bootstrap all of our stuff in. You know, it's pretty similar. I know maybe Alan will get a little upset because I know he's not a huge fan of the builder, but you know, it's similar enough. Like it kind of gives you. It kind of gets you out of that normal Xamarin Forms application pattern into more of what you're going to be looking at with Maui in unstable bits.
Yeah, but I mean, this one line is actually interesting because it's not just the UI. You're also bringing in things from like activation state or like the triggers of your application life cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a bunch going on, but I mean, ultimately, I mean, this is in a compatibility namespace for a reason, right? So, this is kind of that bridge between what we call forms today and what we're migrating to with Maui. I would tend to expect that over time, a lot of that's going to really kind of go away, and you're going to see more and more, at least like if you were just doing a Maui app out of the box, I'm going to say at some point, you probably won't need this, and it'll just run. This is probably still going to exist for, for those who haven't been able to convert their library over yet. But, I think at some point this will kind of go away.
Yeah. Alan is saying the builder is fine. The hosting stuff is heavy. Yeah. We shall see. I think some of it is heavily borrowed from ASP.NET, which for good reason. I mean, that's a lot of what .NET developers do anyways.
Yeah. It does have, if you notice, just take a console application and kind of bring in the dependency on some of that hosting stuff though. And when like Visual Studio, the NuGet package manager gets to that, like, here's everything I'm bringing in, okay or cancel, that's a long bloody list.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on under the hood for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So if I am to go to Prism Maui right now, and can you run this? Like, would it say anything or look any different from any other Maui app?
I don't know that it'll look any different. I don't think I actually.
You hit F5 in Visual Studio with bits that are not. Everything is in preview. Hey, does it work?
It's an alpha. If it breaks, I can, whatever. It's all good. Honestly, because this is 16.10, I think this might only work on the 16.11 preview.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to give it a try.
Let's try.
See what it does.
You probably launched something on your other screen. So there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, you had said it's working for WinUI for now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is just a WinUI app in a lot of respects. So, you do get that little win there. And again, here's our little .NET bot. That was the SVG.
Yep.
And so we kind of got that as a nice little resource that we can use in Maui, which is fantastic here. So, yeah, as far as, actual UI, yeah, there's really nothing that I've done to this sample app other than change it from using the Maui application to using the Prism application and kind of setting up the container. So, but yeah, that's basically it for right now. We'll maybe build out the UI a little bit better over time.
It's a start, right?
Yeah.
And then Prism is not meant for UI. It's supposed to help you get your other stuff ready and testable.
Correct. Yeah. But we'll definitely want to be able to have an application where we can test some of these and kind of just demonstrate some of the other features, like the page dialogues and just navigation from one page to another, and using modals and that sort of thing. So we'll get there. But hey, it's an open source project. Nobody's paying me to do it, so I only have so much bloody time.
I hear you. Yeah, and nothing crashed. Yeah, curious. I was totally expecting your computer to go up in flames, but here it is. WinUI. Now, don't try iOS or Android. That will crash.
No, they just don't work. Visual Studio.
Don't even try.
I get a little warning or whatever that it doesn't know, it doesn't understand the profile or something like that for Android. So that's a fun little one. It works from the command line. It works from Visual Studio Code with.
That's where I'm at. Yeah. Command line.
Yeah. So.
All right.
But that's basically Prism Maui in a nutshell there.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that link again. So don't bug Dan. He's one man, and this is open source. But what can we expect, Dan, between now and November? More things getting flushed out. Maybe a sample app.
Yeah. So between now and November, there are still some missing APIs in Prism MAUI. Like we don't have the dialogue service ported over yet. I don't have regions ported over at the moment. And this is in a kind of standalone, repo, right? Like it's not part of the main Prism repo. And part of that is just, I want to be able to release Prism MAUI at a faster cadence than what we're going to do with Prism. Like with Prism, I mean, I think the fastest we've really done a release is maybe in 6 months, right?
Yeah.
So we don't really release updates to Prism all that often. But, with this being a preview, we do want to be able to kind of get bits out there much more frequently for people to be able to test. As Microsoft is releasing new previews, we should be able to have something there as well.
Yeah, between now and November, I think it should be back to just one preview each month. And I mean, maybe you target like one preview of Prism every second, like alternate preview for us to kind of jump around.
Yeah, I mean, we'll kind of have to play it by ear. I know Preview 5 should be pretty big. They've been working on MAUI as a workload for a while now. I was, long enough that I thought it would have been in Preview 4, but, it looks like maybe Preview 5 or 6, we'll kind of have to see, when that gets merged in, and then does it get merged into the Preview 5 or 6 branch. But once the workload comes out, that'll definitely be a pretty big shift, because we're not going to have that requirement of the dev feed anymore for the NuGet files. My understanding is they actually won't be even generating a NuGet file once they get the workload in place. So that should also be pretty interesting. Yeah,
well said. I also do want to quickly point out that our good friend Eva has been in the chat room. She did turn off Nightbot, so thank you for that. And then Curious Drive and a bunch of other folks are going to be joining us next week. It's going to be big because Ed Charbonneau is doing a whole Blazing into Summer. I was trying to find the link real quick, but it's going to be all week of Blazor next week. So a lot of the regular shows, we are taking a pause because Ed has some amazing guests, including Curious Drive. So he's going to talk about all things Blazor, and I'm sure, like with Dan Roth and other folks, like the whole Blazor on top of MAUI will get mentions, and we'll see some more demos. But that's a whole other world. And if you're doing Blazor, I think like Dan, I think it's fair to say that like dotNET MAUI and Blazor are going to be the two driving forces to kind of that get the most innovation, that kind of bring in new devs into the realm, and just like exciting for .NET devs.
I feel like Project Reunion is, largely about satisfying older devs, and then a lot of this other stuff, between Blazor and MAUI is really like the innovation space. And you see that, and I know that this always gets people fighting, right? But, the Forms team, now MAUI team, like they've long had this, this inhibition of like, if there's something to innovate, they're just going to do it. They're not going to be afraid to try it out. And I have a lot of respect for that, because, so often we kind of get stuck in our little box of, we have to do this or that. And some things are winners, some aren't. You look at the CSS, some people love it, some people hate it. But
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But you've got to try these different things sometimes, and maybe it's not the solution for everybody or every application, but it can definitely be a great solution for some people in some applications. So it's a great place to be, I think, for sure.
Yeah. I did find the link to the Blazor stuff next week. So come and join us. And I think, Dan, like whenever you and me get together, like we talk about the good and the bad, and we share stories, but there's a whole other aspect of migrations. Like this is a lot of it is behind the scenes with the plumbing with Prism. But you have your UI font library that is that already migrated over to Maui, or you're working on it?
Yeah, so it's already migrated over. I was planning on releasing it with Preview 4. However, they did not release something that I needed.
Yeah. No, that's what I was going to say. Like, I mean, that clearly sounds like a whole other show. Like, we could talk about this for quite some time. And I can share some of our pains or our processes on migration. So let's talk about the UI migrations maybe another day.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah. Well,
So,
this is good. So we have Prism. I
mhm.
mean, you're essentially making a promise that Prism will work on Maui once things are final and released in November. So
Yep.
it's exciting, and it's a lot of work for you and Brian, but we are excited and we are happy to help try things out.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot of work for Brian to sit back and watch me do it.
Let's all give Brian a hard time. I don't know when he's streaming, but we can go give him a hard time. Yeah.
For sure. Well, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure to chat with you always.
This is fun. And Alan, Curious Drive, and H3 Tech, and everybody else that's been hanging out in the chat room. Thanks for spending an hour with Dan and me here. What's coming up? Today is Thursday. I don't know if we have anything more today. Probably not. But then tomorrow we have Alyssa joining me, and then I think she might still do her UI Fridays show. Next week is all things Blazor. So a lot of things happening. I think on the Maui front, we just saw Preview 4, but Dan, you're on the bleeding edge. You are already on to Preview 5 and so on, right?
Well, I don't even know if there is a Preview 5 build, but I've been on the nightlies for a while.
Yeah, it's good to see you all. So I think that's the show from us. And let's see who else is up. Fritz is up as usual. Fritz is always up. Like, if Fritz is not online, you're like, is the internet okay? Yeah,
he must be having a power outage or something if he's not online.
Which I actually did have a power outage last Thursday or Friday, like middle of the show, like, and it's rare for us, but it just went off. And then Curious Drive makes fun of us because, like, internally, like, we see all of these links that we are live with, and my interviewee essentially just like froze, like, okay, Sam's gone, but then Ed was in the chat room, so he just like jumped on and just took over and finished the interview, which was nice of him.
That's funny.
But yeah. Thank you, Dan, for taking an early hour of your day to come and hang out and show us some cool stuff about Prism. Exciting stuff.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks. We are going to let you go here, and we are going to maybe see you on the other side with Fritz. But until then, stay safe and stay productive. We'll see you on the next show. All right. Bye-bye.